for listening to episode 161 of the Tennis Files podcast, Developing a Strong Mindset with special guest Jorge Capestany. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Tennis Files podcast. My name is Mirban Aranshad, a former Division I college tennis player, and on the show I interview the world's top pros, coaches, and experts to help you improve your tennis game. And today I have a very insightful interview with Coach Jorge Capestany. And Jorge is a fantastic coach. He's only one of about 11 people worldwide that has earned the distinction of Master Professional with the USPTA and International Master Professional with the PTR. That's a fantastic accomplishment and shows you the depth of Jorge's knowledge. Jorge is also a certified mental toughness specialist through the Human Performance Institute and holds a USTA Sports Science certification. And Jorge is a 6-time Michigan Pro of the Year and 2-time Midwest Pro of the Year, as well as a member of the USPTA Midwest Hall of Fame. And I wouldn't be surprised if he's won one or two more of these things since I checked out his bio, to be honest. And Jorge is also the founder of both tennisdrills.tv for coaches and jorgecapestany.com for players. And I had Jorge on my tennis summit this year as a guest coach, and he had a fantastic session on some really great drills for singles players, actually pressure drills. So kind of along those lines about pressure, we got to touch upon a lot of great aspects of the mental game. And initially I had wanted to also talk about a little bit of strategy too, but we just dove straight into the mental game, and really I think Jorge did a great job to kind of point out some of the biggest problem areas and how we can improve ourselves, and even gave us a really great kind of called a 5-scenario audit, which is a little bit more geared toward just your game overall, but that's a great one too. So you should stick around to the end for sure to hear more about that as well. But I really enjoyed it. It's always a pleasure to talk to Jorge. He has done a lot of great things in the tennis world, as you will hear on the episode, for players and also for coaches. So with that, I'm really glad that you are tuning in, because the mental game is a huge, critical, important area that is not concentrated on enough. So without further ado, here is my interview on the mental game with Coach Jorge Capestany. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Tennis Files podcast. And I'm really excited to have my friend and a great coach on the podcast, Jorge Capestany. And as many of you have probably seen, I've had Jorge on my most recent tennis summit, and he is really a fantastic coach that it really cares about the tennis community, whether it's players and coaches. And so, Jorge, I want to welcome you to the show and really do appreciate you coming on.
No problem, buddy. I appreciate you inviting me, and I'm excited to have a little chat with you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Jorge. And, obviously, right now it's kind of a tough time. So I was just curious if you could kind of just let us know what's going on in your community, and let us know where you're at, and then how tennis is going over there.
Yeah, sure. So I have a couple different hats on in my tennis life. My day job, if you will, is I'm the manager of the DeWitt Tennis Center, which is 6 indoor courts building. We're in Holland, Michigan, and we're owned by Hope College. And besides being the manager there, I kind of help run the PTM program, Professional Tennis Management Program, or one of 9 colleges where kids can go and study that. And we have an outdoor complex. Besides our 12 indoor courts, we have we have 6 indoor and we have 12 outdoor stadiums. They're really beautiful. And as of today's date, we are able to teach tennis outside. So we were able to teach our summer program, which is a big academy that goes basically the whole summer, 5 hours a day. So it's for committed kids. Unfortunately, at the moment, we're still not able to go inside. I live in Michigan, and the governor has classified indoor tennis centers. She's lumped us in with gyms. And gyms, at least for now, are not able to open. So that means tennis centers aren't able to open. So there's some movement and some pressure to try to get her to reconsider that. We're a perfect example. We literally are a tennis only center. We don't even have even a single piece of gym equipment. So we could go in there and be in really a lot of space. As you know, tennis court is a lot of square footage. But for now, we've been surviving, and we had a really good summer. Oddly enough, the very first week of summer in June, we weren't open yet, and then when we started, in essence, of the 10 weeks, we were able to run week 2 through 10. We had to cancel week 9. And the cool part, which is a total surprise to me, was each of those weeks, 10 through week 2 through 10, they were all more filled than last year, those same weeks. So our summer ended up being one of our better summers. We just started taking registrations here for the fall, and we'll see how that goes. It's a little early to tell, but so far, that's kind of what's happened in Michigan and in my life. And obviously, besides the daytime stuff, I have a couple of websites and I do a lot of coach education and courses for people and YouTube channels and all that stuff. So, yeah, I got a lot of stuff. It's fun because I think if people recognize me, they know I get to do a lot of this with my wife, who's also a teaching professional of 30 some years, and my daughter as well. So it's kind of fun.
Yeah, that's what I love about you guys. Is having the whole family in there, contributing to the tennis community. And yeah, that's it's good to hear. I'm here in Maryland, and we have obviously outdoor tennis going on, and then indoor. I believe there's a mask mandate, so you're required to wear a mask. But obviously, some players don't. It's kind of uncomfortable and all that. So it's a very fluid situation, and we'll see what happens in the future. But Jorge, I know we're going to talk a lot about strategy and the mental game and get your thoughts on that and all the great things you're doing at tennisdrills.tv and then jorgecapestany.com. But I just wanted to get a sense of, because it's always interesting for me to learn about how great tennis experts and minds first got into the game. So I wanted to ask you, what was your first exposure, or who first exposed you to the game of tennis?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I kind of came to tennis late compared to the most kids I deal with now. I grew up in Hudsonville, Michigan. I was actually born in Havana, Cuba, and then we fled during all the revolution stuff. And so many Cubans were leaving. I was born in '62. That's the year we left. So I was born there, but came when I was a baby. And a ton of Cubans were leaving at that time. So there wasn't enough work for everybody in Miami. So we were sponsored by a church in Hudsonville, Michigan. So that's kind of how we ended up in Michigan. And I played the traditional sports. There was 3 of us, 3 boys, my mom and dad, and 3 boys. Both my brothers are 10 and 11 years older than me. So I was kind of like, came much later. And they played all the sports. I played all the sports. I grew up playing, basically football in the fall, basketball in the winter, and baseball in the spring, and that was my life. But when I was in 8th grade, a new family moved into town, the Bentleys, and I became really good friends with them. They were my best buddies. They were twins, and they played tennis. And as a matter of fact, their father, who kind of became a mentor to me, he was the tennis coach. So when I was a freshman in high school, I decided, you know what? Spring, that's when we played. It was in the spring. I decided when I'm a freshman, I'm not going to actually play baseball. I'm going to try tennis because I wanted to hang out with my buddies. And I did. I was able to make the last spot on the varsity team. So that was cool because I was a freshman playing varsity. I wasn't any good, but I hustled well and I got the ball back and had all kinds of funky brown grips. But it was fun and I liked it quite a bit. So Ron and Ray Bentley, they're the twins that kind of introduced me to tennis when I was in 8th grade. And I really started playing once I got to 9th grade. And they're great. They're still great guys. Ray Bentley, actually, interesting enough, he went on to play professional football, like for real. He played in the NFL for 13 years and played in 3 Super Bowls for the Buffalo Bills. So this was an athletic family and they were good at everything. They were good at football. So they did football, basketball, and then tennis. So that kind of became my life. As a matter of fact, I quit playing basketball and I just did football, and then I love tennis and I did tennis in the spring.
Wow, very cool. And then how far did you take tennis competitively?
So I started playing when I was about 15. I think my first tournament, I was 15 years old. And I remember it very well because I went to this club. I had the idea after my freshman year that I was not going to play varsity or basketball anyway. and I wanted to play tennis in the off season to get ready for the upcoming spring season. Well, I was an immigrant family, and my dad was not going to be like paying for lessons. I knew that. So I went to a local club. The one near us was about 20 minutes away, and I just walked in, kind of thinking, "Hey, I want to learn about how do people play indoor tennis?" I never had been in an indoor club, and so the coach there kind of took me, and he took me in the room and kind of telling me all the stuff. And he's telling me all the lessons we could take in the after school program here. You can do private lessons. And the whole time he's talking, I'm like, whoa, there's no way. There's no way I'm going to be able to pay that much and do all these clinics. But I didn't know. I just needed info. And I was a little embarrassed to kind of tell him that. So I think he kind of read. So I said, okay, well, let me talk to my parents. And I was literally heading out the door, thinking in my head, like, well, this isn't going to happen. And he said, hey, Jorge, come on back here. So I went back in his office and he said, tell me a little bit more about you. And I kind of told him, I opened up a little bit more, like, hey, we're an immigrant family. I don't think I can really do lessons. I was just kind of looking for a place to play. And luckily, a life-changing thing for me, I think, I don't know what it was, but he kind of felt, yeah, I'm going to help this kid out. So he said, I'll tell you what I'll do. If you're not interested in the after school lessons, I'll give you what's called a walk-on pass. So for $20 a month, you can walk on the court, which means you cannot reserve it. I mean, not even 5 minutes. So you literally have to be on site. And I said, well, how does that work? He says, so you pay me $20 a month. You come in the winter. There's not going to be a lot because we'll be busy, but you can play anytime there's an open court. I'm like, I'm in. Wow. So I remember I hooked up with another kid named Chris, and the two of us, we were kind of the same boat. We didn't have money. So where all the kids were going to the club to practice in the group lessons, we were going to practice with each other. Mm-hmm. And I ended up playing him. So here's how we did it. We got to the club at 3:00. We got out of school. We could be there by 3. So from 3 to 4, there was usually courts. And then at 4:00, there usually was no courts because all the kids would come for lessons. So him and I would just go in the lobby and do our homework. Then at 6:00, the kids would leave and all the adults would come in. We call them the old people. They weren't even old. And really all the courts were booked, but a lot of times people wouldn't show. So at 6:00, we'd go up there and say, hey, did everybody show? Yep, everybody shows. So we go do another hour of homework. 7 p.m. comes by. We run back to the front desk. All the 7 o'clock show. Well, court 8's not here. And we take it for an hour. And sometimes we get kicked off 10 minutes later, or sometimes not. So I played the same guy, not even any variation, same stinking guy, probably, I'm not exaggerating, 15 sets a week. We would just play sets. We didn't know how to practice or work out or anything. So we played sets. So I got my improvement because I started late, was able to go pretty fast because I was committed. I played a lot. I didn't have great strategy. I definitely didn't have good form. I had all kinds of funky grips and stuff, but I got kind of match tough. And that's kind of how I got started. That's how I got serious. And then probably the second year there, the coach realizes, okay, this kid's really into it. So he started giving me opportunities. He said, look, I know you can't pay for the after school lesson, but if you are willing to clean the club and sweep the courts and stuff, maybe I can get you. I'm like, boom, I'm in. Wow. So I did everything there. I cleaned toilets. I cleaned the clay courts in the summer. I'd sweep the indoor courts with this big vacuum, and I would do anything I could. Eventually, I got to string rackets. So now I'm actually, by the time I'm a sophomore, I'm in the junior program. I'm in it twice a week. I never took a private lesson. That was really expensive. But now I'm in, and that was the way I could do it. And then by the time I was a senior, he said, well, you can maybe start assisting teaching on some of the little kids classes, and I'll pay you $10 an hour. That you put that. So I kind of worked myself into the program. And then I got better. I wasn't really good until my senior year. Like all late starters, if you're late to the game, a lot of times you're let's say you're a 4 or 5, and when I start, I'm a 3-5, right? So I look at you and I go, here's Maribel, here's me. And then maybe if I work hard, I can catch up. After a couple of years, I catch up. But the problem is my actual game caught up, but my view of myself was lagging. So I would probably lose to people that I would be or really had caught up to, I'd probably lose to him for a whole other year before I got really much better than them. Then it was easier. But I remember the first tournament I went. I was so excited because I went with a group of guys from my club Ramblewood, and I looked up to these guys. They were all really good players and USTA players, and I played. I remember it like it was yesterday at Grand Rapids Racket Club, which doesn't exist anymore. And we go, and we had the same like shirt. And I'm like, I'm sweet, man. I'm part of this team. Mm-hmm. And all my guys are winning their matches, and I play and I lose in the first round 6-0, 6-0. Now, I did play a seed, a guy named Brian, and I got smoked. And this is probably when I'm a sophomore, so I'm really not very good yet. And I was mortified, right? Like all my friends are winning, and I feel embarrassed because I didn't win. Plus, I got smoked. So this is how little I knew. The coach said, "Hey, listen, you know, your next match, you know, you should be working on this." I go, "What do you mean next match?" He goes, "Well, there's a consolation draw for everybody that." What's that? He says, "Well, everybody that loses in the first round, you get like a whole other tournament, and it's people that lost in the first round." And this was not a feed-in; it was just a first round consolation. Mm-hmm. And like bonus, so I get to play again. Yeah, you get to play again. I'm thinking to myself, this is sweet because now I'm playing all the scrubs. Because it's the toilet bowl. Everybody had lost, so this will be like another tournament of everybody that lost. And so I'm excited, but I lost that next match 6-0, 6-0 as well. Oh. And that was the toilet bowl. And I'm like, oh, that was really mortified. I wanted to quit. That was one of the first times I wanted to quit tennis. Probably 200 times I wanted to break up with tennis, and that was probably one of the first ones. And then, but I just liked it too much, and I kept at it. But that was my first experience. And the thing is, and this is a story I tell to all my personal students, the guy who beat me in that first round, the seeded player named Brian, I probably played him, it seemed like at least once or twice a year for the next 4 years. And probably by the next year, to be honest, because I was getting good fast, my game had probably caught up to him. I probably should have been 6-4, 6-4, either way, right? But I would lose to him 3-2 because it's like, it's Brian. He's like a seeded player in a tournament. I mean, he's like a pro to me. And by the third year I was playing him, I really was better, but I'd find a way to lose because I talked myself into it. I over-respected him maybe. And then it wasn't until about the fourth year I was playing him, where now I'm significant. If I put it in numbers, I might be a 4.8, and he's probably a 4.2. And I probably should win, and I finally do win, but I really had to like overpass them because I do think that's one of the things that I know from coaching so long, that people that start tennis late, either adults or juniors, the blessing of starting late is you got a nice fast incline. Okay, the first year you're like, this is easy, I'm going to be a pro at this rate, but then you don't realize it levels off, and it's more difficult to double your ability again in year 2 and 3 and 4. But those were some tough lessons that I learned. But I think that's a common thing, and I see that in my own students now. So I'm warning them. I go, look, we just had tryouts in Michigan, high school boys tryouts like last week, and I tell all our kids that train with us in the summer, don't look for trouble when you go out there and you're beating a kid that last year was ahead of you. That's normal. You've trained 25 hours a week, and that kid hasn't. So don't talk yourself into the old habit. Just believe that maybe you're better now. Because I blew it on that front for sure.
No, I mean, I really appreciate that story. And I'm curious, you mentioned like it was not only that particular instance where you were thinking about maybe quitting, but also there were a couple other, many, you said, I think 200 other times. Oh, yeah. How were you able to ultimately keep coming back? Because I do know some players that I played in juniors that they got so frustrated with the game that they eventually quit, yet you were able to even sustain 2 back-to-back 0-0 losses and still play the sport.
Yeah. So one of the things that I stunk at was I would relate like my tournament results to me were like my personal value. Like if I lost in a tournament, then I sucked. Not as a tennis player, just as a person. So that was a pretty dangerous way to think. I do think that it's shocking in our sport how many times someone does that to themselves. We have this little tennis ball. It costs $1, and it can ruin your whole attitude about yourself. So the thing that kind of kept me going back, so tennis is frustrating, right? So it can be really, really fun. I mean, unbelievably fun, but it can be unbelievably frustrating. It's a sport that is full of errors. And if you're a perfectionist, this is a great sport to go crazy on and drive you crazy. So I think at the end, what I would maybe break up with tennis for, I train hard and I go out and I play poorly. I think that's the mantra of the average tennis player in the world is so many people play better in practice than they do in a match. And that's, all those guys that do stuff online, when we survey people, that's the number one complaint. Number one by far, like, I wish I could just play in a freaking important match like I do in a practice. What's wrong with me? They kind of feel like they're inferior somehow. But the thing that brought me back is it was fun. I mean, I loved hitting balls and I loved just being with my friends and playing practice sets. It was the tournaments that would kind of eat me up, but that was really not the tournament's fault. It was the way I interpreted it. I learned later in life, and I teach my players now, that a tournament, a match, is nothing more than a quiz. I have this analogy, like if I go to college and the professor tells me, I work at a college, right? So let's say I go to Hope College and the professor says, okay, welcome to Anatomy 101. And in this class, you guys are adults and I expect you to show up. I just need you to show up and attend. I'm not going to have any quizzes. I'm not going to have any tests. I just want you to show up and then we'll have a final exam. Well, initially, when I was in college, I'd say, sweet, no quizzes. No, this is good, right? But then what happens if I fast forward to the last day, I'm sitting in that class and it's the final, it's the only grading thing. And I look at the answer or look at the first question and I realize, I don't know that question. And then I look at the second one, I don't know that one either. Then I realize, oh my gosh, I'm in the last day of class. I'm about to fail this class. I didn't know that until I showed up because I never took the quizzes to tell me, hey, Jorge, you suck at this and you better get good. So that's really what match play is. There is no failure. There's only feedback. Okay. So when you play a match, tournament or other, that's what the thing is. You gather feedback. Okay, I played. Sure, you're going to have some emotions like I want to win really bad and I don't like Mirabon. I don't like the way he called that ball. Or whatever. You're just playing. You're gathering feedback. You're getting data. And then I go back to him and I say, okay, my serve was weak. My second serve was very attackable. My backhand, I leave it too short. And that's gold. Okay, I've accomplished what I should want. Now I got data. And I go back and I work on those things. And I take another test, another little quiz, which is a match. And then I get more data. So I think when I started to look at it that way, it really helped me quite a bit more to not just always be so stressed out about the results. Just like this is a quiz, and I need to know. And guess what? It doesn't go on my permanent record. I'm not going to flunk out of tennis university. I'm just gathering information. We have way too. I don't have this problem with adults so much, but with the juniors, it's a rampant problem, I think, in our country. Because when I talk to a lot of other coaches, we have professional practicers. Okay, so back in the day, when I played, you played tennis to get good. Now you take lessons to get good. And lessons, I mean, listen, I give lessons. I'm not against lessons. I think that's a good thing. I like group lessons. I like private lessons. I think it's all part of it. But too many people are heavy on that. Their ratio is 4 to 5 hours of practice and 1 hour of match play, and I like to keep those even. So I tell a junior or a family, like if you have Jimmy and he's doing 4 hours of group drills, he should be playing 4 hours of matches. If not, you're out of balance. You really, and those are the same ones that usually manifests itself in tryouts. Like I said, we had tryouts. That's really the final exam. You can have a kid practicing 25 hours a week, and he could be getting worse, possibly, because he's like, look at me, I'm showing up to summer. I did all this stuff. I'm going to be like number one singles for sure. And then you realize, well, you didn't practice any tournaments, you didn't call anybody, you didn't do any of the stuff that kind of gets you match stuff. And then you get the tryout, and the coach doesn't say, let me see your how good you drill. He goes, Jorge, play Maribon. And if I start double faulting, and only then I realize that I'm not match tough, it's too late for me. So that's a common thing that I think a lot of my own students have struggled with. And I know I've seen that on my own game for sure.
Yeah, I really, really like that analogy, Jorge, and to just, that playing matches are like quizzes or tests, because it's really, I mean, it's funny that people, they wonder why they're not playing well in the competitive situations. And yet if they were to review, their hours logged playing, they haven't spent many hours at all in that actual environment for which they're wondering why they haven't they don't play so well. And so, with that, I mean, how can we, aside from obviously playing matches as well to practice those situations, how can we create a practice environment that is, more suitable for training us for those types of situations?
Well, I think it all starts with an audit. Whenever I work with a student or consult a student, the first thing I do is I say, we're going to look at your tennis regimen and we're going to do an audit of it. So when you are a tennis player, there's four big areas that you train in, right? There's technique. You got to know how and how to grab it, and that might include lessons and stuff, but technique's super important. There's a whole area of movement you got to deal with. You should be practicing movement. You should be practicing strategy, good patterns and smart play. You should be practicing mental, how to control your thoughts and all that stuff. So of those four, most people practice the technical, like almost a lot. There's some people that are totally addicted to that, and they don't do much on the other ones. Okay. So for me, what I learned over the years, and I wish I would have learned it for myself earlier, is I would, like when I was a young kid, probably in the summer, I would practice 20 hours a week. Okay. Of those 20 hours, probably 0 minutes were training in mental toughness. It didn't even occur to me to do that. Like, how do I do that? Read a book or something? So, but when you ask tennis players, like there was a famous survey a long time ago where they asked pro players, what percentage of tennis do you think is mental? You probably heard the phrase, "Oh, tennis is 90% mental." I don't even know where that came from. But the pros, on average, said it's like 70% mental. They think, right? So I don't really know. I think that's more of an opinion question, and it probably varies from person to person. But it's not 10%. Okay, so let's just say it's 50%. Let's just say it's 40%. So because we know there's people with tons of beautiful strokes that just cannot win. So if beautiful strokes was the measure, then something's going on at my club, because the guys with the beautiful strokes don't necessarily win the tournament. So I think it's kind of fool's gold and easy to chase. So, but when you ask the dangerous question, which is, okay, so I ask people, what do you think, Betty, and what do you think, Johnny? What percentage of tennis is mental? Usually they'll tell me, I'm getting responses anywhere from 20 to 80. Okay. So let's say Johnny says that's 40% mental. I say, okay, let's say you're right. And then say, now let's look at the last 2 months of your time. And are you, everything you do, that's our audit. How many hours of practice, how many tournament matches, how many practice matches, are you doing any off-court training? And we just write it all down. And then we look at it and say, how many, you said it's 40% mental, but you have 0% time in your regimen. And he's like, yeah, I guess that's not good, is it? But the problem is they don't know, like China's like, well, I don't know what to do. Like, how do I train mental? So I think a lot of it, for me, some of it's on the court. You can do drills that put pressure on you and stuff like that. But a lot of it is just things I learned off the court, in books and articles and presentations. I remember reading the book, The Inner Game of Tennis, which is a classic, which is probably viewed by every tennis pro ever. And shock, when I was 16, 17 years old, I used to get mad at myself. I wasn't like a total maniac on the court, but I was very impatient with myself. And my inner voice was really bad. I would be an inner critic and I'd miss a shot. And I didn't always say it out loud, but internally, like, oh, you suck. Come on, man, move your butt. And I was really kind of negative. And just reading that book and understanding self one, self two, and what that means, it was just like blew my mind. And I'm like, the next day I'm working on that stuff. So for those of you that don't know that book, one of the things, this is so helpful to me. The book kind of goes, I'll paraphrase this idea, which is basically, if you look at a tennis match, a lot of times a single player will be angry, right? He's yelling at himself. Sometimes the inner voice becomes the outer voice and you hear it. Come on, Jorge, move your feet. That backhand's horrible. You suck. Whatever they're saying to themselves. And it's weird because it's just one person and they're having a conversation. So it usually takes two people, right? So this book kind of puts out the theory that what's happening there is Jorge, and he's talking to Jorge, right? But is it like Jorge's right finger talking to his left foot? So here's how he breaks it down. He says, it's my mind. It's Jorge's mind yelling and scolding Jorge's body for mistakes it made. So I miss a backhand. I go, come on, man, that backhand is a joke. Okay, well, what happened there? It wasn't my left hand telling my my right hand that it's a joke. It's my mind, okay, telling the body how bad it is. Okay, so my inner coach, my inner critic, is kind of an assassin. And some people talk to themselves so negatively that if someone, the things that I used to say to myself, if someone else was saying them on the sidelines, I'd probably jump the fence and
Beat him up.
get a fist fight, right? But I'm saying that to myself. So when that was explained to me that, hey, that's self one yelling at self two, it's your mind yelling at your body. And here's the trick: if your body can learn a lot, right? So if you can just quiet your mind, tell self one to just shut the heck up for a second and let the body figure it out. That if the body can perform without totally being yelled at every 2 seconds, it does better. So I intellectually that made sense to me, right? So I went out the next day. I remember I played on a clay court, and I thought, okay, every time I make a mistake, I'm not gonna get mad. I'm just gonna, it's data. Okay, I hit it in the net, so my racket must have been too close or whatever. Or that one, I sliced it and it floated. Okay, so I must have come under it too much. And this data, it's not emotional data. It's just a data point. And the other kind of epiphany I had, also in that book, is the way it's all perspective, right? So if I'm playing you, Mirvan, and I hit a backhand down the line and it goes out by a foot, well, that's not good, bad. And for me, I might assign that as something bad. Like, I hit that backhand wide. That's bad. Okay. And then if I labeled it bad, I might start to get angry about it, right? But the exact same shot, you would label it what? Good.
Great.
Great. I got a free point here. Okay. So how can it be both? It isn't, right? It's just the way we interpret it.
Exactly.
The third person on that court would be a chair umpire. If there was a chair umpire, he would look at that ball, and how would he look at it?
Neutrally.
I don't care. It was wide by a foot. Okay. He just looks at it as data. So I had to learn that when I made my errors, that I had to react like the umpire. Just look at it like, I was wide, so it was probably a little bit late on my point of contact. I got to get it more in front, and I won't go quite that far off on the ankle, and just use it like that. Now, if I told you that the next day I did it perfectly, that'd be lying, but at least I had a plan. Okay, so that's how you get good mentally. So it depends on what the mental issue is. If you get nervous, you can play pressure sets where the points you affect the scoring. So I would play you, and every game starts at 30-30, so that we're right in the thick of it. If I have if my mind wanders, I can start little rituals where I say bounce, hit, bounce, hit, bounce, hit. So I keep my mind focused because your mind can only think of one thing at a time. If I tend to be angry, and cussing, that's usually past thinking, because I made a mistake and now I'm complaining about it. If I tend to be nervous, like, oh my gosh, if I get this game, I'll be up 2-0. That's usually future thinking. Future thinkers, when your mind's out in the future, if I win this, there's all my friends. I can't wait to shake hands and get out there. We're all going to be happy that I won. That's not all in the future. I tend to be nervous. Future thinking causes nervous a lot of time. Past thinking usually reveals anger. If you see somebody like they're not pissed about the next shot, like, oh my God, this next forehand is horrible. Usually if they're mad, they're talking about the last forehand, something that just went bad. So then there's tricks that you can do so my mind wanders. So I'm going to just give myself, I'm going to hit with you. And every time I hit, when the ball bounces on the ground, I say bounce. And when I hit it, I say hit, bounce, hit. I occupy my mind. And now I have something to do, and it helps me. So there's lots of ways that you can do it that I've learned over the years. But that's a huge thing. The inner game of tennis, self one, self two, and just being that umpire are some major things that help me in this whole area of mental toughness and just be more calm and have a better perspective.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Definitely, we're going to have a link to the book, The Inner Game of Tennis, on the show notes page. It'll be in the app that you're using to listen or underneath the video. And yeah, Jorge, see, you kind of mentioned how when you first tried to implement what you had learned, in the first few pages, you obviously couldn't do it perfectly. So what is the key to being able to consistently implement? Because, obviously there's a lot of players who maybe they find a great idea, a great concept, and then they initially they try it out and then maybe it doesn't work because they're, a lot of society is into instant gratification and, they want results immediately. And then they stop practicing that. So how do we stick with it?
Yeah, to me, what made me stick with it was all I needed to stick with it was to see just a morsel of improvement. Like if I or just to conceptually go like, yeah, that would help me because I know I'm a maniac of the way I talk to myself, and if I could do that, so I was excited to do it. Now I would try, okay, and maybe I wouldn't do it so well, but I would still say, you know what, even though I stunk at it, I did better today than my normal state of thought. Now, obviously, if I'm playing a match and I'm ahead, I'm not usually angry when I'm ahead. I'm talking these tough matches where I'm losing that I think I should be winning. If you just isolate those matches, those are the more important ones to kind of do it. So I think the key is understanding. You might even journal this kind of stuff, but just say, my goal in the next month is to have better inner voice, the way I talk to myself, and I'm going to do these 3 or 4 things. And I'm just going to practice them just like my forehand. I wouldn't expect my forehand, a new forehand, for example, to just kill like the first 3 seconds after I try something new. If my coach has changed my grip, my point of contact, and my swing path, I might say, okay, logic tells me I'm in learning mode right now. And then I'm going to do training mode. And then from there, I'll go into competition mode. Same thing with these mental skills. I'm learning how to look at a shot unemotional. And I'm going to probably stink at it because I'm not comfortable with the stuff that I've done. So if you look at it kind of like the same patience level that you would at a shot, I think that's what helps. As a coach, I can get some kids to kind of buy in when I explain it that way. And I tell them up front, I go, look, so now you know what I want you to try. You think you're going to do it perfect? I just asked them, you think you're going to do it perfect? They, probably not. I said, okay. So you'll do it. And I'll say, that was a good one. That was a 9 right there. That was like almost perfect. That was a stinky one, Mayor Brown. That was a 3, make a fart noise or something. And just kind of like let them know, like, okay, I'm out here battling, I'm trying stuff. But it's really fascinating. I mean, one of the things I was going to tell you, so we talked about this a little bit before. So I have this course for mental toughness. That's my kind of opt-in course that I give free to the world. But before I sent it, I sent out to probably 20,000 followers. I said, what are your struggles when it comes to mental toughness? Well, there's no right answer. I just want to hear from you all personally. And I got a ton of responses. And the 4, I'm going to just share these with you because they're kind of cool. I decided to take them all and put them into 4 kind of big categories. Category 1 was fear of losing. A lot of people felt like, man, this is my issue. I get nervous and I'm always afraid of losing. So that was 1. The second category, which was a surprise to me, was closing out matches. I get ahead and I can't finish anybody. What's wrong with me? I can't finish off sets. I can't finish off matches. If I'm ahead, I always find a way to give up the lead. So that was interesting. The third one was people recognizing that their inner voice was horrible. Like that's, oof, I'm very impatient. I'm mad at myself. Sometimes I make a fool of myself. My inner voice has become my outer voice, and now everybody thinks, oh, yeah, that guy's crazy. And then the fourth one was just dealing with overall choking and nerves. I'm so nervous, like I can't swing normal. Like my swing is actually being changed physically. So those were the 4 big categories. And as I looked at them, outside of that one about closing sets, I could resonate with, all that stuff. So I'm kind of looking at my thing there. I think when it comes to closing out matches, I'll talk a little bit about that one.
Yeah.
I think what tennis players don't recognize or don't appreciate maybe is just how diabolical the scoring system is in our sport. When you play tennis, it's one of the few sports where I'm playing you, Mirban, and my points are not cumulative. I don't just keep adding like baseball, basketball, soccer. Most sports is cumulative. You got one, it's one. You got a second point, it's a second point. But in tennis, I play you. Let's just take the very first game. I play you. I win some points. You win some points. At the end of that game, you win it. All right. So what happens to those 3 points I won? They're flush. They go off my scoreboard. Okay. So that's a thing that a lot of people don't quite get. So what happens is it builds pressure. It's inherently pressure filled because it's frustrating. I'm winning a lot of points. I'm down 4-0. What's going on? How can this Mirban guy beat me? I'm freaking At 0-4, I'm playing pretty good. This is, and people don't like that feeling, right? So it also is tough because you and I could be playing. Maybe we have a really tight set, and maybe it's a bit contentious, and it goes to 5-5, then it goes to 6-6, and then it's in the breaker. And you and I might have been playing for more than an hour. A lot of energy, a lot of emotional. It's been over an hour. We're hot, we're sweaty, and both of us know that in the next 60 seconds,
Yeah.
one of us is going to grab a set, and one of us is going to lose the whole freaking hour's worth of effort. It's going back to zero.
Sucks.
So imagine a basketball team playing, and you said, "Okay, guys, the score. Here's the deal. Let's stop for a second. It's the third quarter, and it's late in the third quarter, and the score is 92-88. And here's what we're going to do: we're not going to play for the clock. We're not even going to play fourth quarter. We're going to play up to 100. Okay, and whoever gets to 100 first wins. The other guy, nothing. Okay, so that's a little bit more like what tennis has, right? So what happens is when it's 96, 97, both those teams are like, dude, this is like we're inches away from winning, or the whole thing goes to pot. All right, so I think tennis scoring is really tough. It's made for comebacks. It's made to be really difficult to put people away. In ping pong, I used to play a lot of ping pong. If I was playing you, Maribel, in ping pong, and let's say I'm up 20-5. Okay, so we play to 21, right? That means you are facing literally 15 consecutive sudden death points, right? Yeah. So there's no way you're going to win. Even if I choke, you're probably not going to pull off 15 in a row, right? But check out tennis. If you go to the tennis version of that, and I'm up 5-0 in the third set, right? I got 5, you got 0. There is no sudden death. I can play a long game. At 5-0, I'm serving 5-0, and I serve, and then play a long game. You win a point, I win a point, you win a point. You are behind 5-0, but you don't have sudden death right away. Okay, so there's some pressure or there's a release of pressure compared to like ping pong scoring. So what happens is we play a long game, and then you win the game. So it's 5-1. No big whoop. Jorge's so happy. You serve. We play another long game. I win some points. You win some points. Back and forth we go. But you win the game. So now it's 5 for Jorge, 2 for Merriman. And then we keep going. And I play a lot of the next game. Great points. I win some, you win some, but you win another game. You see how it's easier to make comebacks in tennis than it is like ping pong? So that in and of itself is brutal. So that when you're up 5-0 in the fifth and the fifth set, it's tough to put people away. It's not so tough to put them away in like a sport where like ping pong, where the scorekeeping is different. So once people kind of get that and they recognize, there's so many things in tennis that people just got to give themselves a break for, like the amount of errors we make. 78%
machines.
Yeah. Sometimes up to 80%. This is the pro level. 80% of the points on the WTA end in errors. And I got juniors that if they make 50% errors, they're freaking out. Like, they want to shoot somebody. I'm like, you picked the wrong sport if you're a professional. Our game, there's errors in it. Rafa makes errors, unforced as well as forced. So those are kind of fascinating things that I think make tennis awesome and also very frustrating.
For sure, Jorge. And actually, now that we're on the topic of closing out matches, and I agree, it's very tough. I just watched a clip a couple hours ago of a player who was down 5-2 and then won like 15 straight points, and then ended up winning 7-5 from being down 5-2. So it just made me think of that. But what are some tips that you actually have for players who do struggle? They're up in matches and then they end up losing, and this happens consistently. What can they do?
So what I found that most people that struggle from that, at least the people in my orbit that struggle with that, is lack of match play. So they're usually out of balance when you do that audit. And you're like, wow, Maribel, here you have a lot of privates, a lot of drills, a lot of sparring sessions, not that much competition. So maybe you're a little nervous when you get in there because you're not used to it. Okay, so that's the number one thing. But the other thing you can do is the way you practice, right? So pressure, you actually want to practice in pressure. So we have had this happen to me a lot. A kid will play an upcoming tournament. Maybe it's a qualifier. It's a big tournament. He wants to go to nationals, blah, blah, blah. He knows the date on the calendar a whole year ahead. And he prepares. He trains. And before that match, he thinks he's on track and he's doing everything right. He's taking extra private lessons and extra groups, and I'm running 5 miles. He's doing everything he thinks is good, but he's not playing. Right. So he gets there and now he's feeling the pressure, and this is a new thing to him. So what I would recommend, what I've had success with, is trying to create pressure in the practice match. So if I play against you, here's the different levels of pressure. I hit with you, Maribon, and we just spar. It's fun. We're getting a workout. Maybe my timing is better. No pressure. There's not even a scoreboard. Okay. But then we say, okay, here's something a little bit more pressure. Hey, let's play out points. I'll just feed it. Let's just play at the 21 ground stroke points. Not even a serve. We just play out groundies. That's a little bit more pressure because now there's a scoreboard, right? And say, hey, let's serve and play out points. But I serve 5, you serve 5. Okay, that's a little more pressure because it seems more like a match. And then we say, hey, let's play a set. It won't be in the tournament. It'll just be a practice set. Well, now one of us is going to win, one of us is going to lose. So a little more pressure. All right. And then you say, hey, I'm going to play. You come to my academy and say, Maribon, I want you to play Peter. Go over there and play. Now other people are going to know about the results. And there's a scoreboard. But it's not official. It's not going to go on USTA. It's not going to affect your UTR or your rating. But it's a match. And so there's going to be a winner and a loser. And then you play a tournament match or a high school match. That is on your record. Okay. That is going to check your ranking. It's going to affect your seedings. It's going to affect your UTR. So now that's right up there. That's where people kind of get the most nervous. Then you have a match that counts for your record, and you're playing a rival, or you're playing a rival school or someone you don't like, and that's even more pressure. So of all those levels of pressure, I think very few people actually get that last one where you can play a bunch of practice sets, and I'm glad you're playing practice sets, but it's not a tournament match. You're not going to create the pressure in a practice match that you would have in a tournament. So here's what I recommend. Let's say I'm coaching you and you're 12 years old, and I decide, okay, everybody here gets nervous, and so I'm going to have you play sets, but instead of just playing regular sets, I'm going to inherently change the rules so it makes pressure go up. So here's a couple of ideas. I'm going to say, okay, Maribon, you and I are going to play a set. You're going to play whoever. But every game, instead of starting at love, it's going to start at 30-30. So immediately you're right at the business end of the game. You're going to get more of those. That's when people get nervous, right? The end of a set, the end of a game. They just feel different. We know they're only worth 1 on the scoreboard. But man, well, that's break point 4 or 5. It's 1 point, but it just feels different. Like, oh my gosh, So we put people so they experience that, because by definition, a pressure point, the way I call it, is 30 all in a game or later, or 4-4 in the set or later. So if I played a regular set, the majority of the time is not under pressure points. But if I play you and I say, forget playing sets, let's play for an hour. And here's the rules. Every game starts at 30-30, and every set starts at 4-4. And now you and I go out and do an hour, by definition, almost the entire points. And here's what happens. I'll do that as an assignment, and inevitably one of the kids comes back, oh, so I hate it. That was stupid. I hate it. Well, that's the kid that's probably choking his face off because he can't even deal with it in the practice setting. So you can kind of ramp, you can kind of quick start, if you will, the number of pressure points you play if you play a certain way. There's all kinds of other little games, if I get break point, if I get hold point, if I get game point, if you will, and I don't win game point, and then I lose all my points. That's another game that you play. Kids hate it. But it's tough because that means, hey, I got to close out. Or you and I can battle, and it's like we're only going to score if we can win 3 in a row. So I'll serve until I win 3 in a row, and then you get to do it. And maybe I can never do it. Man, I just can't string points together. So there's all these ways that you can tweak it. A more nasty one, but I actually use it, is I call it ITF sets, where I will say during this set, Maribon gets 2 bad calls. Okay? You can call it whatever you want, but don't call them at 15 all, Maribon. Call it on break point and stuff like that. And it's kind of evil, but it's practice. And I tell both kids or adults they can do it, and they do it, and they just freak out. Like, I can't believe it. I go, dude, this is how easy you're flustered. A little rule change that we all know is part of the game, and we're all doing it. We're telling you up ahead that it's going to be a bad call, and you get it. And so a bad call can cost you a point. but your reaction to it can cost you the match.
That's right.
I've had that happen for sure. Back in the day, I would get a bad call. I'd be so upset that it would cost me, if not the match, at least another couple of games. So I was like so freaked out, like I can't believe it.
Yeah.
So it's interesting.
Yeah, that reminded me of actually one of my somebody who played a lot of juniors when I did. I mean, he ended up reaching like the semis of the NCAA singles championship, and then I think he got a couple bad calls against him, and then long story short, he got so pissed off that he actually walked off the court in the semis of the NCAA tournament. So really, obviously there are some people who a point or two can really affect them really badly, but that's when you kind of turn to resources like Jorge or the Inner Game of Tennis, or podcasts that you listen to like this one perhaps for mental game advice to help you deal with it. Jorge, how about the opposite? How about when players, they have bad starts, they tend to fall behind very quickly? And I mean, I've actually had this problem before too. What types of advice do you have regarding that? And is that more mental as well, or is that also strategic?
I think it's a little bit of both. So for years, I don't think that I labeled myself a slow starter. Okay. But as a coach and a player, I know people that are slow starters. They notoriously get down early. Okay. And a lot of them feel it that way. So I would say that, yeah, first of all, that exists. There's people who are inclined to have slow starts. But it wasn't until maybe 20 years ago, and I've been teaching 40 years. So it was quite a long time ago that I learned this technique, and I actually learned it from a coach at a conference. And he said, how to survive. He actually asked a question to the audience. He goes, what do you do if you have a student that's a slow starter? How do you help that guy? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm actually wanting to know. Okay. So his idea, I totally swiped it, is this. If you are notorious for a slow start, the number one thing you can do, besides making sure you're properly warmed up physically and all that stuff, is in the beginning, your goal should be to play long points. Long points. If you think about it, if you look at like 10 matches where there were slow starts, usually, and you look at the slow starter, it's quick errors. They're making errors super early in the point. Misreturn, double fault, misreturn, and they can't even get going. Okay. So the human body will actually get going after it gets 100 or 150 shots. But these guys, they're just shooting themselves in the foot. So that was what he came up with. I go, that's actually pretty ingenious because, even though I wasn't a notorious everyday slow starter, I had moments or certain matches where I had a slow start. And I could think back, I go, that's exactly what happened, is I was just missing early. Maybe it was because I was not moving well. Maybe it was because the guy was overpowering me. Maybe it was because my decisions were bad. So now I had to go back and teach that to people, right? So I said to my students, okay, listen, play long point. Well, guess what? That's hard to do. You don't just, they say, Coach Jorge, I want to play long points, but I'm friggin' missing. So, your advice is useless. What do you mean play long points? So here's what I figured out. You play a long point means get some hits in, okay? But you have to do it per person. So for Mehrban, a long point might be pushing, hit loopy balls, just keep it going. Maybe that's your personal
Chip
way.
returns, yeah, stuff like that, yeah.
For Jorge, it might be I got to slice everything because I know if I slice, I make it. Okay. And for Peter, it might be, you know what? I just got to hit tons more topspin. That's my mechanism for playing longer points. I had tons of topspin, had tons of safety. So I'm not going to tell the person which way to do it. I'm just saying you decide. You know your game better than anybody. But you need to play points. Like if someone said to you, if you get 10 balls in, you get $1 billion. What would you do? I mean, and there's the guy right there with the money. I mean, for me, I'd probably slice, to be honest with you. On my backhand, I know I'd slice. On my forehand, I'd probably hit extra topspin. That's the Jorge formula. Okay. But what is it for my wife, Marty? What is it for my daughter? What is it? So once you know what that is, then, and you know you're a slow starter, that's a really helpful formula. That works like 80% of the time that I've explained that to students that haven't tried it, because now they're into the point. They've hit 4, 5, 6 shots, 4, 5, 6 shots. It's kind of hard to get down in the dumps that quickly if you're making 4 or 5 shots per point.
Yeah. I mean, it's huge because I was on and yeah, I think you might have been too, Jorge. I'm not sure, but a webinar with Craig O'Shaughnessy and our friend Will Hamilton. He showed us a bunch of stats, and one of them was basically that the point ends shots 0 through 4, 0 being a double fault, the most. So you get double-digit percentages on those first four shots, and so if you're actually able to make all those shots or as much of them as you can, then you are statistically helping yourself by leaps and bounds in winning more points and winning the match. So
Yeah, and I think it makes so much sense. Tennis is a game of errors, and if you can, forever. I always thought the best. I mean, for too long as a player, my goal was lots of winners. I'm going to stack up a big pile of winners, and I have hardly any errors. That was my goal: high winners, low errors. Okay, and that sounds great on paper. Okay, the only problem is very few people in the world can do that every single day. So I heard a person talking about, it's actually supposedly came from Brad Gilbert, although I didn't hear him speak it, but I know he's pretty smart, so it's probably true. It was basically saying that when he worked with Andre, when he took over after Andre had really crashed down to 141 in the world, describes the early Andre, right? Lots of winners, low errors. That was his goal. And Brad had to coach him, no, here's the new way you should be playing: low errors, low winners. And it's like, wait a minute. There's no, that clearly high winners, low errors is better than low winners, low errors. I mean, it is. Well, yeah, it is on paper, but the fact is, if you are a person trying to make a living at tennis by hitting lots of winners and low errors, very few people can do that. Even a good day for Rafa isn't like that. Okay, so I think it's kind of like an immature way to think of it. Yeah, every day I play, I'm going to hit 10 winners to 1 error. Well, no way, dude. I mean, you got to have some realistic. So when you look at it as low winners and low errors, that means you kind of grind. And if you look at how Agassi kind of evolved with his comeback, that's what he was. He told Brad, okay, I'll try it. And the story goes that he came back and said, I can't do it. He goes, why? He goes, this is exhausting. Because playing these points, I'm body punching people and never put the ball away. I don't want to hit 50 balls a match or a rally. It's just too exhausting. He goes, exactly. So then you got to get fit. If you know anything about him, he was a maniac with his fitness, running up these crazy hills in the desert in Las Vegas, and he got super fit. And then that's how he did people. He outplayed him from the baseline and kind of tortured him, kind of like a Rafa does now, where he just he puts city miles on your body. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not highway miles. He's running you, running. It's like
to
the ground.
He wouldn't put it away. He'd make it keep going.
It's a very interesting thing. But if I can get my students to think low winners, low errors, that's the better way to think. But conceptually, a lot of people, even now, they're like, nope, no way. And I say, look, if you're asking me what's better, on for sure, high winners, low errors. If I can be guaranteed to do that, I'd go for it. But what we know is that your average player that tries that can't do it. Maybe a day. Man, that one day when I played over there in Kalamazoo, that was my day. That was the day I actually had high winners and low errors. So I just need to do that every day. Well, if you're doing that every day, by the way, you might as well go pro, because that's even the pros can't do that on a regular basis. So that's another mind shift that has helped quite a bit with my students.
Love it. And then, Jorge, how about, I think people, maybe this is caused by, I don't know, social media or whatever, or just ego, but there are a lot of players that, you mentioned, who had the feedback that, well, I'm worried about these extraneous factors. I have people watching and I'm worried about what they think about me, and I want to go out there and greet them after I win. And then they get nervous and they think about that instead of actually executing the game plan that hopefully they've created before they got on the court. So how do players like this, who struggle with this type of issue, do better with that?
Yeah, so this really has to do with perspective, right? So tennis is a sport. It's mental, it's emotional, it's a one-on-one. It's not like a team thing, like, oh, we lost. It's very adversarial in its nature. When I play you, it's like boxing from 90 feet away. Like, I don't get to actually physically touch you, but my shots, you feel them. If you're playing Rafa, you feel the weight of his shots. He's punching you around the court, and there's a one-on-one confrontation. It's not like Doubles is even a little bit easier. And if that match becomes feisty, or there's a couple of close calls, and now the people are kind of barking at each other, it can feel like a fight, like an actual fight. So I think, I'm looking at my other screen over here because I was just talking about this with someone else and writing some things down. So I think one thing is you got to have perspective on the errors. I understand that. Look, I'm in a sport where 80% of the points on the WTA tour are the best players in the world, multimillionaires, and in points. So I can't just be an immature thinker and say, but I don't care. I'm Jorge and I want to have winners. Whatever. I mean, that's the stats. What worked really good for us and my daughter, my wife and I coach tennis and we coach our daughter, right? So that's ripe for possible problems. I think we did it pretty well because we had, a lot of examples of squirrely situations growing up and people in my life that didn't do it so good. So, but here's the two questions that I asked my daughter. I would tell her this up front, and I coach this now with my own students, and I would recommend as a player, adult or junior, this is your measure. After a match, you really have only two questions you should ask yourself, or I would ask my daughter. Number one, did you fight like a dog? Because you control how hard you fight. And we are the Capestanys and we fight like dogs, okay? So that was the one question. Awesome. And number two, did you represent yourself and mom and dad or our club or whatever properly? If you can say yes to both of those, I don't give two poops about the result because I know you played, you got some feedback like a quiz. And if you can answer those, that makes sense because I'm going to judge you on the things you can control. I'm not going to judge you on if you won or not. Like, how did you not beat Sarah? I mean, geez, Sarah just started playing. Winning is out of your control, okay? But those two things are whether you fight like crazy and whether you behave well, that's within your control. So those are the two, I call them almost dangerous questions. And luckily for us, my daughter answered that question properly, like literally every time she played, except one time. And then we had a little come to know Jesus meeting at night. But basically, that's the measure. Tennis, another dangerous question is what kind of person are you becoming because of your involvement in tennis? So this is for my really intense kids, that are practicing a lot because it could go both ways. I mean, I love tennis because I think it teaches life lessons like crazy, but you have to be intentional about learning life lessons. And as a coach, I can't just say, oh yeah, tennis teaches life lessons. Well, not if I'm not bringing them up and showing people, right? Yeah. Working hard, not getting what you want, that's a life lesson. Setting goals and putting a system behind reaching them, all these different things. But I think the thing with life lessons is it's easy to just kind of say, yeah, sports teaches life lessons. I like that debate. Does sports teach life lessons or reveal it? Both. If you're a maniac, it's going to reveal that. But you can also, you have to be intentional about that stuff. I think people have a misnomer. I heard Jim. Oh God. No, the big forehand guy, the pro player. He's a
Courier.
Courier. Geez, how do I just listened to him like 5 minutes ago. He was talking about how your best tennis, like your best outing ever, that happens about maybe 5 times a year for a pro, where they can go out and say, that was one of my best days. And they recognize that. The rest of the days aren't going to be their best ever, where they come off and say, man, I played a perfect matches as good as I could have today. That only happens 5 times a year. The pros know that. But we have rec players and we have juniors that think, no. For me, that should happen like every single time I step on the court. And if not, I'm going to be pissed about it. Like, how can that not be? That's immature thinking again. You have to have perspective to think, really probably in every other sport. I don't know other sports or pros like that. But knowing that and knowing that, hey, there was a great interview actually it was an article and I can't find it because I've been looking for it. But they had asked a bunch of pros that won Grand Slam tournaments. Okay. So you have to win 7 matches, 7 to win a Grand Slam, right? And they would ask Roger and all these different people. And they said, of the 7, how many of those 7 would you say you played great tennis? Like really, it was a good match. That was an interesting question, right? So on average, they said 2 or 3 of the 7, I would say I played really well. The other ones I played average and or bad, and I had to find a way to win. Wow. The people that win in Grand Slams don't even have half the matches where they would walk off and say, "Man, I played really well today."
Hmm.
You
Great
know,
point.
so if that's another perspective, right? Like, man, why am I thinking I should have this when it's really, you know, even the best players in the world aren't getting 50% of the matches in a Grand Slam. And obviously, they must have played well enough to win the Grand Slam, but not well for them, not like what they would say a great outing, right? And that happens a lot. You look at, Federer wins Wimbledon, and not all 7 matches. There's some 5 setters, and some scrubby ones, and there's some where he escapes. That's typical. Okay, so to think I'm going to play good every day, I think you're setting up here for some extra frustration.
Yeah, no, great points, as usual, Jorge. And you really just have to understand the game better, and really what's going on in terms of like what we're not machines, and we're not going to win every single point, and we need to really figure out the statistics, and what'll help us win. And that doesn't involve just hitting tons of winners every time and playing and treeing all the time. You can't just do that every time. So, or much at all, really. And Jorge, you mentioned that you have like a course and everything. I was curious, isn't there like an opt-in too? I was wondering how people could maybe check that out.
Sure. So I really have 2 websites. I have stuff for coaches and I have stuff for players. And one of them is tennisreels.tv. The other one is jorgecapestany.com, my name. But here's the easiest way. I have one URL where you can see them both and you can see which one you want to go. So it's just my last name,
Mm-hmm.
capestanytennis.com. So if you go to capestanytennis.com, there's 2 boxes. One says for players and one says for coaches. So the coaches one is all drills, and that's actually you got to pay for. It's a subscription site. The players one, jorgecapestany.com, is actually a free site. It's all my YouTube videos. And on that site, there is a 4-part mental toughness course that you can get for free. I was just checking, have over 12,560 people have gotten that course already. Those are those things I told you about: fear of losing, closing out a stat, your inner voice, and nerves and choking. It's coaching on that. So it's there. It's free. It's a no-brainer. You get them. The first video, 2 days later, the second, 2 days later, the third, and 2 days later, the fourth. And that stuff has been really helpful. It's really all the stuff I've learned through my own frustrations in our awesome sport, and all the way to helping other people kind of get over their mental toughness, struggles. But yeah, it's there and it's free. So capestanytennis.com, you'll see both links.
Fantastic. We'll have that link up there as well from the show notes page. So speaking of helping people, Jorge, I just want to give you a shout out because, you helped organize, a huge effort that ended up helping a lot of coaches, with their finances during, this very tough time. So I was just wondering if you could kind of like explain kind of what you did, because I think that was a really cool initiative that you gathered. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. So I'm just like you. I'm in the online education space, but I'm also a teaching pro. But what happened is I got asked to be on a committee, actually a task force from the USTA. When the pandemic hit and like 88% of the clubs in America closed down for a while, a lot of pros, like over 80% of the pros, had lost some or all of their income. And a lot of them were struggling, right? And these are my fellow pros. I like pros. And so the idea that I had in this task force was, what if I could go to all the online coaches, yourself, Ian, Scott Baxter, myself, Peter, Will Hamilton, I'm missing people for sure, Gigi, and just say, what if you guys would take Craig O'Shaughnessy, would you guys be willing to donate a course or 2, maybe 3 max, to a dashboard that we could build all these courses and then have like, I think we ended up with 30 courses on this dashboard. Some of these courses were like 4 hours of content. Some of them were 35 minutes. But the value of all these courses was like over $3,000, right? And I thought if they would do that, first of all, I didn't know if they would. But the good news is, shout out to the online coaching community, 100% of the people told me, yeah. Not a single person said, nah, I'm not in it. And here's how we set it up. We said, look, the idea is we're going to take all those courses. I was going to have my guy build them all on Teachable so that they exist. And then we were going to allow every pro in the country to sell that package. You didn't buy one, and you bought the package of 30 courses, value of $3,000. they were going to sell it for $99 to their members and keep 100% of the money. So as a matter of fact, we didn't even collect the money. So if Joe Smith from Chattanooga Tennis Club wanted to sell it to his members, he was actually setting up the money on his own club website. So that was the idea. And luckily, we had great response from the coaches. And then we signed up probably over 400 coaches. And I'm sure a lot of them promoted a lot. Some of them didn't promote very aggressively, but over $250,000 was raised in those courses. And it was really unbelievable because I was in the front lines of that. I was kind of a volunteer that had the idea. But consequently, I was a guy, I was getting the emails. And I got emails that made me almost cry. Like people like, I got one email, dude, that freaked me out. The guy said, listen, I don't know you, but I want to thank you and the online guys. When I saw your thing come through, it was the first good news I had in over a month. And I sold the course and I had, we had some guy that made over $10,000. Okay?
Amazing.
And some made a couple $100, some made $1,000. We had over a dozen that made over 4,000 or over $2,000. But this guy was saying I literally had written the last check and my bank account was down to nothing. And now I had like 10 members buy this and I got $1,000 that I didn't think I'd have. And I want to thank you. And I was like, whoa, I forwarded that on to the online guys because it was so cool. But I appreciate you bringing that up. That was a great example of the online coaches community and really coaches taking care of coaches and members. It'd be people sending it to their membership. So, your club members probably love the coaches, so they're like inclined to buy it. So it was great. I'm real proud of everything.
Yeah, again, big kudos. I mean, just shows, how great of a guy you are. And also, the tennis community. Like sometimes I think people they have a perception that maybe like, especially the online tennis instructors are adversarial or something, or they want to be the best. And surely, we want to improve ourselves, but we often, promote each other and say, hey, Jorge has this really cool course coming out, Will, Peter, etc., Scott, and yeah, it's just a great community and is really a great feel-good story and really impacted people very well. And I'm curious, in that kind of theme with coaches and what's going on. I mean, what type of advice do you have for coaches who are experiencing, obviously tough times, as to what they can do to, better themselves and maybe create some opportunities despite this tough time?
Yeah, so most of the coaches, I have a lot of coaches that subscribe to my site either now or in the past on my email. I probably got over 15,000 emails of coaches, and I communicate with them regularly. The good news is, as of now, most of them are back to work, but they still have this scar of like, I didn't have income for 3 months.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of catching up. It's not like I can just not pay my mortgage for 3 months. So I think my wish for the tennis pro community is that they were a little more adept and willing to experiment with making money online.
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily even saying selling courses. I think that's a lot more involved than people think. They go, oh, if Jorge can sell the course, I'm smarter than he, I can sell. I'm talking just to your membership, the ability to videotape some strokes and analyze it, send it back. You can do this literally with free apps.
Yeah.
Okay. And say, look, I will here for $100, I'll do 2 or 3 of your strokes and do it. And that's a great way to learn. I wish coaches would do more workshops, like mental toughness workshop at my club, instead of just thinking the only way I can make money is to be on the court teaching. What if I could gather 14 people and go through my video course? Interestingly enough, I had a guy in San Francisco call me. This is like a brilliant idea. This is quite a while ago. My course came out. He liked it for the mental toughness and he shared it with everybody. And then he called me like a year later, says, I have an idea, but I don't know if you'll let me do it. I go, well, what is it? He goes, I want to do a mental toughness workshop at my club, but here's how I want to run it. I want to show your first video, and then I want to take them on the court and practice what they saw. And then we're going to go back and watch TV, video 2, go back. And he says, my plan is, it's going to be like 3-hour course, and I'm going to charge $97, and I'll give him. And he wanted to know permission if he could use my videos. I go, dude, those are YouTube videos. Knock yourself out. Make $1 million if you can. And then he called me. He says, look, I had like 12 people sign up, and
Awesome.
he made $1,200 in 3 hours.
Sick.
And the kids got some training. He showed YouTube videos, And I don't know what he did on the court, probably just kind of
Implement.
practice what I had
Yeah.
just talked about and that kind of stuff. I think a lot of coaches don't get that. And I worry about coaches. It's physically a tough job, right? I know a lot of 40, 50, 60-year-old coaches that are kind of broken down physically. I'm kind of one of them. But at least I know how to make money off the court. I'm not relying on myself being on the court all the time. So that would be huge. And that's just an example where you can do a workshop and make $1,200, or you could have taught 24 hours of privates at $50 an hour. And that's like a whole lot more stress on your body. So that's kind of my advice. I do a lot of mentoring of coaches that way. It's fun to teach it. It's fun to teach that. It's fun to do it.
For sure. And I mean, it's, internet is a great thing where it's a great marketing tool too. Like you put one really great video about the stroke or strategy or something, and then all of a sudden people are wondering, oh, wow, where's this guy or gal from? And, maybe I can get some lessons or like a coaching call, or that's another thing you can do, coaching calls. So, and, one-on-one with just your phone. So yeah, a lot of great opportunities there, and appreciate you letting the community know about that. Jorge, one other question for you. In terms of just overall development for players, so a lot of times we know there's all these different facets that you talk about, the mental, physical, strategic, technical, and we don't know where to start. So what's the general approach that we could take to figure out, okay, what is the next thing that I should be working on to help myself get the most gains and the best performance?
Yeah, so for that, I have a system for that, and I call it the 5-play situation. So I'll kind of describe what that is. So in tennis, and this is really my audit, I do it for my own game and I do it for every one of our students. It can actually serve as a report card. Let's say you're my student again, Mirban. He's 12-year-old Mirban. He comes to Coach Jorge, and I look at him. The first thing I'm going to do is say, okay, I'm going to measure you 5 things. Okay, there's 5 big parts. I'm not talking the footwork, mental. I'm actually now specifically your game. I call those the play situations. I did not invent them. They just exist. So think about it. When you play tennis, you only ever do one of 5 things. And here's what they are. You're serving, or you could be returning, or you could be playing from the baseline, or you could be transitioning to or playing from the net, or the other guy's up, in which case you're hitting passing shots and lobs. There's not one scenario in tennis that's not one of those. Okay, so that can become a really clever audit. Okay, so now I'm looking at you, and this is why I don't think players develop. Your job is to develop your whole game, not ignore major areas, right? That doesn't mean that your net game has to be as good as your baseline game. Just like Agassi's net game was not as good as his baseline game. But you can't have like glaring areas like, man, he's horrible on the return, he's horrible at the net. This can't be. So our promise to our members at a club, the way I run a clinic, is every time you come, we're gonna practice. This is my promise to everybody. You're gonna practice serves, you're gonna practice returns, you're gonna practice baseline, passing shots and lobs, and transitions and net shot. So if you look at yourself and you say, okay, the last 10 matches that I lost, this is what I would recommend. One of those 5 areas is causing those losses. Is it your serve that lets you down? Is it your return? Is it your baseline play? Is it your net play? So that is like your whole system, your whole career. You're just managing those 5 areas and like, you know what? Here's where I was when I was at the best. My serve was good. My return was average. My net game was really good. My baseline game was average, and my passing shots and lob were average. Okay, so I knew, okay, if I really want to go to the next level, I got to work on my passing shots and stuff, and I got to work more on my baseline game. Okay, so I was more of an attacker. So when you don't, at least you know what you're going to audit, right? Most people are like, I don't know, in tennis, there's so much. There's only 5 things you really need to worry about. And if you really look at yourself, you grade yourself A, B, C, D on those things, you'll know right away, okay, this is my area. So when I do this with adults, here's what happens. They'll say, oh, yeah, I know exactly. They'll find 1 or 2 areas that are weak. So it's typically net play and maybe, return, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
And then I say, okay, so now we know, okay, you're a 3-5 player aspiring to 4.0. We know that your net play isn't very good and that you're whatever, right? So now we say, so you, Mirban, if that's what we decide for you, you're going to make sure that you're going to remain on point. You're not just going to go through life on autopilot. I went to my 3-0 drill and I hit with my butt. No, man, you got to have a friggin' plan. You got to have a roadmap. And now we know that your baseline play isn't right, or so I'll teach them some drills that will up the number of touches they make, so that in the next month you're going to hit 3,000 volleys. Here's how. But if I was talking to another student, you know what? As your baseline that's letting you down, I'm going to show you 2 games. In the next month, you're going to hit 10,000 round strokes. You got to customize and do that stuff. For the average player in our country, that's not happening. They're on the autopilot. I go to my club. Yep. I do my morning drill on Tuesdays. I play with my gals on Friday, and I'll hopefully get put in the lineup to play a USTA match once in a while. And guess what? I've been playing in the last 6 years. I've had the same problem. My net game still sucks. Hey, it's 5 years later. Guess what? My net game still sucks. Well, come on, man.
Yeah, what have you practiced?
Have you put a system in place? Well, I don't know what to do. Do I take more privates? Maybe. But a private lesson is just to put in a system, So I love creating games. That's kind of what I'm good at with drills anyway. Creating games and say, okay, for that particular need, here's the 2 or 3 games you'll play, and your touches will go through the roof. Touches on the ball count, it matters. But it's got to be customized, because Mirabon might need touches on volleys, and Marty, my wife, might need touches on overheads. But for whatever it is, I can come up with drills like that. Actually, most people should be able to do that on their own. If I put a gun to someone's head and say, listen, you got to find a way to hit a ton of volleys, they're not going to go, oh, I just can't figure it out.
Yeah. I'm going to be forced to do that. Yeah. It's brilliant. The 5 scenarios audit, really good stuff there. Jorge, really appreciate it. And so a couple of final closing questions for you. I know we've been going on for a good amount of time, which has been very enjoyable. And we know we could go for many more hours more. But if you had the opportunity, and let's say this is hopefully next year, where the U.S. Open is in full swing, crowds everywhere, knock on wood, and they say, hey, Jorge, we really love what you're saying and the messages that you're spreading. So we'll give you the opportunity to put up a quote, have a huge billboard like inside US Open, and you could put any quote on that billboard that you wanted. What would you have it say?
So I'm thinking out loud here. So if I wanted to do something on mental, so one of the quotes I use a lot, I just gave you one: ball count matters. Okay, because I think I practice wrong way. But another quote I use when I'm dealing with strategy, probably even more often, is how you hit the ball matters, but where you hit the ball matters more. Because I think that helps a lot of people with that. I believe too many people are addicted to technique. They're just, when something doesn't go well, I need another lesson. And there's a lot of pros willing to just give you a billion lessons. And then on the perspective one, so I guess this would be my quote: what kind of person are you becoming because of your involvement in tennis? It's kind of a deep question, but here's why. Because I have students, and for me, I'll just use me so I don't throw anybody in the bus. There's been times where my involvement in tennis has made me more disciplined, more enjoyable to be around, a better person, more organized. There's been times that it's gone that way. There's also been times where, because of my involvement in tennis, I've been more miserable, more angry, more impatient, and a total dick to be around. And I've had that. Okay. So we picked a sport. It's kind of a frustrating sport. It can be tons of fun, but it's not always fun. For most people that are competing and doing it, there's plenty of times where tennis isn't the most fun thing. So I think you just step back and say, why am I doing this? I'm probably not going to go pro. I'm not going to make a living here. So what is it? What kind of person have I been becoming, or am I on the path to being, based on my involvement in tennis? And if you have a really bad answer for that, like, gosh, I'm more impatient, I'm totally a jerk to people, and I'm mad all the time, you got to stop for a second and recalibrate. I'm not saying quit tennis, but to be honest, if someone said I can't, I that's how I answer, and I've been that way for 2 years, and every time I play I'm miserable, I would say quit tennis. People say, well, how can you say that? You're a tennis coach. And I've told people they should quit tennis before. I quit tennis. I broke up with tennis, like I said, plenty of times. I come back because I love it still. But it's kind of a deep question. So what kind of person are you becoming because of your involvement in tennis? That's my billboard.
Wow, that's really deep. It's brilliant. Yeah, I really love it. Yeah, it made me think back to when I was younger. I mean, kind of what we were talking about earlier, and now also that tennis would pretty much define me. And if I lost, basically the whole day or week is ruined, thinking about my, what I did wrong and all that. But now these days I use it as a tool to help make me become a better person and, become mentally stronger. And, I do a lot of activities to train myself for tennis, but then they end up helping me with other aspects of my life too, like meditation. It helps with tennis and with everything else. So yeah, great quotes, I guess, that you've given us. Appreciate that. One last question for you, which is my trusty closer. I use it basically every time, unless I'm just talking on my own, which is, what is one key tip that you can give us to help us improve our tennis games?
I would say if I had to boil it down to one tip, it's probably going to be focus on your decision making, not your technique. So every time I hit a ball, I should know if it's a yellow ball or a red ball where I'm in trouble or a green ball where I'm going. So decision, I believe so many of the errors in tennis can be traced back to not bad technique. I mean, some can, but just bad decision. I went for a green being aggressive, right? And yellow is just a rally ball that I keep in play, everyday ball. 70% of the balls in tennis are yellow. And red is when I'm in trouble, I'm just defending. Okay, so if you're making the right decision, like every time you hit, you're hitting the right shot, you're hitting green when you should, you're hitting yellow when you should, that's what's out of whack for most people. So that would be a color coding, I call that. So just focus on your decision making and not so much on trying to get these pretty strokes that might just abandon you under when the scoreboard gets turned on.
100%, Jorge. And again, can you let everybody know where they can, check out what you're doing and follow you?
Yep, CapestanyTennis.com. That's where you'll find both websites. I think you'll put up a link, but CapestanyTennis.com, and there's a bunch of stuff for coaches and players. And if there's nothing else, grab that free mental toughness course. It's really a good one.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, obviously, we built this episode on the mental game, and you've heard a lot of amazing advice from Jorge about this such a critical aspect of our sport, and definitely highly encourage you to go to CapestanyTennis.com and to pick up that mental game download, the free download. So Jorge, thanks a lot for all your contributions to tennis and helping coaches and players as well, and myself. And I'm really looking forward to connecting again soon, and creating some more content, and keep up the great work with you and the fam.
All right, buddy. Thank you again for a chance to speak to all your followers. Have a good night.
Anytime. You too. Have a great night. All right. I really hope you enjoyed my interview with Coach Jorge Capestany on developing a strong mindset. And again, thanks to Jorge for coming on to the show. I think we covered a lot of great things in regards to the mental game, and I hope that you pick up one or two of these pieces of advice that were said on the show, and you implement the next steps for achieving a stronger mindset. And I really do appreciate you tuning in. And I also would really appreciate it if you would subscribe to the Tennis Files podcast. And you can do that by hitting the subscribe button. So if you think that this episode was brought value to you, and you think you can improve your game as a result of the Tennis Files podcast, I would appreciate it if you subscribed. And it's great because then you can get all of the episodes downloaded straight to your podcast app and device of choice as soon as I publish that episode. And it would also help the show get more visibility, which is always good. So it can help more people. So you would definitely be doing a great deed with that 1 second subscribe button press. All right. Well, I also want to leave you with a quote, as I often do at the end of the show. And this one is by J.M. Power. I thought it was a very good one. J.M. said, "If you want to make your dreams come true, the first thing you have to do is wake up." It kind of makes me think to the mornings, because I always start out my day with a exercise regimen, and that really gets me going in the morning. And my morning routine starts everything off the proper way. And it all starts really with just figuring out, what you have to do. So you obviously create these goals for yourself, whether that's for tennis or other things. And then you have to really come to terms with, okay, like what is really going on here in my game or in my life? And what do I need to do to actually change things and make things better, because I think a lot of us, we tend to just kind of make excuses or shove things to the side and ignore the problems that we have. And yet it's only through addressing those issues that you're actually going to reach where you want to be, instead of always being disappointed and all that. So that's something that I've learned. Definitely not easy, but the rewards on the other side are really fantastic. So, all right, well, I really hope that you enjoyed this episode once again, and hit me up on Instagram or Facebook, or email me at mehrban@tennisfiles.com. That's MEHRBAN @tennisfiles.com. And let me know what you thought about the episode. And with that, please have a great week, a safe week, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Tennis Files podcast. This is Mehrban signing out.